Welcome back to The Explainer. You know, we love taking incredibly dense, fascinating research and breaking it all down. So today, we're diving right into Satya Prakash Dubey's CIA framework. We're going to explore what is arguably the ultimate mystery of the human mind. And hey, it might just completely change how you view your own reality along the way.
So let's just jump right into what philosophers call the hard problem. Think about it. Why do we actually experience things, like the vivid, bright redness of an apple or that sharp, sudden sting of a burn? Why doesn't our nervous system just process those signals completely in the dark, like a biological computer? It's a question that has literally baffled scientists for generations. But this framework we're looking at today, it offers a radically structural approach to actually solving it. Because this is a highly structured, mathematically dense framework, here's our roadmap for navigating it together. We'll hit 1. The hard problem. 2. The explanatory gap. 3. The pure detector. 4. The math of consciousness. 5. Competing theories. And finally, 6. An enduring mystery. All right, let's get into it.
Section 1. The hard problem. The question consciousness must answer.
We really have to start by framing the exact problem that has resisted scientific resolution more than any other in the history of studying the mind. Just think about a machine like an oscilloscope. It detects the physical structure of a radio wave, right? The electrical peaks and valleys. But a listener's consciousness, that's tuned to an entirely different register to actually hear the music. The machine sees the structure, but you experience the sound. In this framework, your brain is kind of like the speaker and the receiver, but your consciousness isn't the radio itself. It's the listening.
Section 2. The explanatory gap. The missing puzzle piece in neuroscience. This concept exposes a massive blind spot in our current understanding. You see, neuroscience is absolutely amazing at correlating brain states to sights and sounds, but it completely fails to explain why any given neural pattern actually generates a felt quality. Which brings us to the big reveal of the CLI framework. It defines consciousness incredibly narrowly and strictly as a pure detector. It completely separates the job of feeling from the job of computing. It literally calls consciousness a non-transformational detecting substrate. Its one and only job in the entire system is just to register experience.
Section 3. The pure detector, separating experience from intelligence.
So the crucial point here is understanding exactly what this detecting substrate does, and honestly, more importantly, what it explicitly does not do. Under this framework, we kind of have to unlearn a few things. If a theory out there says consciousness is processing or interpreting raw data, like recognizing a familiar face or planning your route home, it has mistakenly labeled a computational operation of the brain as consciousness itself. Actually, let's be super clear here. Consciousness doesn't compute. It doesn't decode. It doesn't plan. Those are transformational acts handled by totally different faculties. Consciousness simply detects the end result. It is the pure, unfiltered awareness of the experience.
Section 4. The math of consciousness. The formal architecture. Let's see how this actually builds into a formal architecture. We're going to use some tools borrowed from information geometry, but don't worry, we won't get lost in the weeds here. The framework models the complete state of a biological subject as living jointly in what they call a two-register state space. On the left side, we have the physical room of measurable biology. This is the structural register. So this is your neural firing rates, your blood flow, basically things any instrument can read. On the right side, though, we have the experiential register. This is the room of pure feeling, where the felt quality itself actually lives and breathes.
And this beautiful, really simple equation brings it all together. It introduces the consciousness projection operator, which is represented by that little C with a hat. It acts kind of like a mathematical filter. It takes the total state of the brain, that's the S over there, and it extracts only the pure experiential feeling, the VXP. So it strips away all the heavy computation and leaves behind only what it actually feels like to be you in that exact moment.
Now, the source points out something absolutely crucial. The expectation value of any purely physical measurement taken on this experiential state is exactly 0. This mathematical orthogonally, which just means the two states are completely independent and exist at right angles to each other, is profound. It formally proves why no physical instrument, whether it's an fMRI or an EEG, has ever produced a direct reading of a feeling. If you use physical tools that are built for the structural register, your expectation of measuring the experiential register is, mathematically, exactly 0. You simply cannot measure the music using a tool that only measures electrical waves. Make sense?
Now I know what you're probably thinking. Whenever we start throwing around terms like operators and Hilbert space, people tend to immediately jump straight to quantum physics. But to maintain total credibility, the author provides a really strict disclaimer here. Yes, this framework borrows Hilbert space mathematics from quantum probability, but it is absolutely not claiming that consciousness is a physical quantum phenomenon in your biological tissue, okay? This isn't about quantum coherence in your cells. It's a classical theory. It just uses this advanced math purely as a formal convenience to represent two complementary ways of looking at one single system.
Section 5. Competing Theories. The Scientific Lineup.
We really need to impartially see how this new structural postulate stacks up against the current heavyweights in the science of consciousness. When we compare this to the rest of the field, a pretty stark contrast emerges. Leading theories like integrated information theory, or IIT, focus heavily on how data is combined, and global workspace theory, or GWT, focuses on how information is broadcasted across the brain. But the CA framework uniquely isolates detection from computation. Those other theories? They do a great job explaining the processing, but this framework argues they still entirely miss the pure detector that actually feels that final result. And the timing of this framework is just incredibly relevant right now. As the paper points out, a massive 2025 empirical test between those two leading theories, the Cognitate Consortium, actually failed to fully uphold either one's core predictions. That yielded some pretty mixed results. So what does this all mean? Well, it proves that this scientific field is still wide open for rigorous, new structural models like the CAA framework that approach the problem from a totally different angle. The old models just aren't closing the gap.
Section 6. An Enduring Mystery. The Unsolved Edge.
Finally, let's look at the limits of this framework, because, true intellectual honesty requires stating plainly what a theory does not yet solve. The author very openly admits that while this framework perfectly maps the architecture of the mind, the absolute deepest question of all remains an underived postulate. Why does this experiential dimension even exist in the universe in the first place? Why does physical matter couple to this realm of feeling? We still don't know for sure. But by separating the detector from the computation, we finally have a really precise boundary for the mystery itself.
I want to leave you with this really provocative thought straight from the source material. If all your neural firing is just the radio equipment processing signals in the physical dark, what is the pure detector inside you that actually gets to enjoy the music? It's an incredible shift in perspective, one that completely changes how we look at the brain and the very feeling of being alive.